Workshop. And to take this workshop forward, please join me as I welcome to the stage Amit Karna, Professor, Strategy Area, Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. Let's put our hands together and make some noise for Mr. Karna.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible at the back? Good. So I've been told to give you some food for thought. I'm not going to be, walking between you and your lunch. So I'm trying to keep this session in two parts, as I was suggested. The first part, I'm going to discuss a little bit on what my view of innovation is. We have heard fantastic panelists here talking about business and the technology interface. I also heard a couple of them talk about the time for technology is over, and now it is what the business leaders will do with where the technology is. By the way, very interesting, I was talking to Kanika the other day that this is an innovation summit, but almost 90% of the panelists and moderators are technology officers, digital officers, and somehow the innovation as a discipline has been handed over to the CDOs and the CTOs, and rightfully so, because the only innovation that we see around us is technological. So what I'm trying to do for the next 30 minutes is move away from technology and take you to the business view of innovation. And we'll try to understand this concept of what I also heard quite a lot in the last 2 hours, disruptive innovation. I'll try to break it down, and that's what perhaps the academics like us are good at doing. We'll break it down to a very simple notion of what disruption would mean. And then in the second half, we will come back and talk about some of the ways to get out of it. So that's the workshop for which I suppose you are being given a certificate for. But being an academic, I think I can't resist giving some homework. So there will be some homework for you to do when you are having your lunch. Okay. So let's first move to the let's first understand what innovation is. Right? Actually speaking, if you really ask me who would be the right person to innovate or become the chief innovation officer, a few years ago it would have been the chief R&D officer, because those are the guys and the women who are doing R&D, who are designing new stuff, who are designing new services, and so on and so forth, have their hands dirty in the lab. But and I remember Ashish Kushu from L&T was talking about this, that innovation or technological innovation or technological advancements is not just something that is new, but something that has a business case for it. And gone are the days when we say that this is new and therefore this is something that we should invest in or we should be proud of that we have invented, unless and until what we call as entering the economic system. Right? So as you can see, there is one product here on the left, which is the invention of the car, which I'm sure we haven't bought any of those. And then the second one, which was invented in 1929 by Henry Ford, which is actually the innovation of the invention, and that is what hit the market, and rest, as we say, is history. The invention in the second product actually was the process innovation. He invented assembly line, and that made the car feasible to be produced at a low cost and increase the utility of the product, which made a business case of it. To summarize this, I'm going to leave you with this thought that not all inventions are innovations unless they qualify on two more parameters. One, they should have some use case, what many panelists have talked about, that they should have some use, some utility without which the customer is not going to be paying for it. And the second qualifying criteria is that it should also be commercially viable to produce it. So one of the panelists talked about that AI is 70 years old, but you know what? With the connected data, it is now becoming commercially viable. With a $25 per month subscription, we are able to create content which we were not able to create almost 6 months ago, just with $25 of subscription. Now that is the innovation, because now somebody has worked very hard using whatever models, foundational models and otherwise, have been able to make it commercially viable. So if at all anybody in this room here wants to benefit out of innovation, you'll have to focus on both, which is the utility to the customer and our right to be able to bring the cost down. Now my job my day job is to educate. I have to make sure that the students, the executives that come to IIM Ahmedabad understand what it means to innovate, what it means to strategize, right? One of the paradoxes, as I call it, there are several paradoxes, and I'll cover a few in innovation. One of the paradoxes is that innovation is about doing something new, and when you have a chief innovation officer, you're supposed to be doing that something new every time, which means you want to do something which is not thought out by others, and then you want to do it in an assembly line, that innovations should keep happening. Just imagine giving a chief innovation officer a KRA of innovating. We don't know what they are going to come out with, but they have to come out with something new. Every quarter, every year, every month, every periodic review, you need to bring out with something new, right? It's like asking a music director that, you should create great music, but you know what? It has to happen every 31st of the month and every quarter of the year. Now, this is a paradox, because we want it to be zara hatke, but we want to produce it at scale, because that's what our shareholders are paying us for. Thankfully, now the research over almost last 120 years since the Industrial Revolution tells us that innovation is replicable, it is doable. You can have a strategy to innovate, and as some of the stalwarts have talked about, it is actually a matter of discipline. And like any other discipline, it can be learned. It can be taught, it can be learned. How do you innovate? How do you bring things which are always new? Very simply put, it goes through a process. And as you can see, and I think we have some other sessions on design thinking in the afternoon, as you can see, this process is, although it appears linear, it has a lot of uncertain elements, right? For example, one of the things that you would have noticed at the bottom is that accidents are also part of innovation foundation. That penicillin, it just accidentally got invented, and many other such innovations. In fact, many of our fintech innovations here have accidentally stumbled upon demonetization in 2016, COVID in 2019-20, and suddenly, kind of diffused very, very rapidly. By the way, I will have my email address at the end. You can drop me an email. I can send you all the slides if you want. Yeah. The basic knowledge, then moving towards invention. The basic knowledge part, we can leave it to the universities. We can leave it to the government and funded universities. R&D is what many companies invest in, but again, that can be left to some of the either labs or companies that are purely in invention. But then comes the whole notion of innovation. In fact, if you really push it hard, the whole concept of R&D, R is invention and D is innovation. But when we look at it from the business perspective, the success will depend on both the things meeting up. One, there should be a demand for innovation, which requires adoption of any particular product or a service by customers. And as I said earlier, there should also be a supply side, enough supply to be done, which is only possible if it is commercially viable to produce that innovation below the price that the customer is willing to pay for. Now, let me deep dive into these two, demand and supply. So I want you to think about innovation from a demand and supply perspective. And that will give us a typology of innovation, if you will, in a couple of slides. I'll come to the demand supply in a minute, but one of the most difficult part of innovation is to manage your day-to-day operations and innovation. And why is it difficult? As we know, our brain is divided into two parts. Our day-to-day operations require us to be capable of doing same thing, routines, as we call them, again and again and again, because that's where large organizations get efficiency from. And innovation, on the other hand, requires you to keep on exploring new things again and again. And the difficult part is we have this one side of the head, which is exploring, other side, which is telling itself that keep following the same thing again and again, because that's efficient. Now, what you require, therefore, is an ambidextrous manager who can think on both the brains. The left side will help you earn money for today, or this quarter, next quarter. The right side is going to ensure that you will still keep having money or opportunities for the next years or other decades, right? Unfortunately, most of the incentive systems in the corporations are too short-sighted. They promote left side. The education system, as we all know, is extremely geared towards left side. Of late, India has seen a little more of the right brain, liberal arts blooming, but the corporations are yet to step up to provide incentives on how do you promote right brain thinking. And the second part we should be aware of, that inside a supply chain of an organization, there is also an innovation value chain. And I think this is fairly known to everybody. The bottlenecks are very clear. Some place the bottlenecks are we just don't get ideas. These days that is not really a problem, mainly because of the internet, because of even AI will tell you how to innovate, for example. The second one, how to convert, which is how to select what is the right one for you. To my mind, that remains the biggest bottleneck today. Because when you select some, you are also saying no to many other options, and nobody knows right now how each one of them are going to evolve. So that, therefore, has currently become a very huge bottleneck. And once we will have a better way to understand which ideas to select, of course, then the bottleneck goes to implementing the innovation. Let's go back to demand and supply part. Now, if you really dig down very deep, all the innovation failures that have happened so far, and I guess that's the best way to learn from, all the innovation failures can either be attributed to technology not working out, which is we were not able to do this at scale, or we were not able to do it cheaper, or we were just not able to do it, or to the market adoption. Right? So there cannot be a third place where the problem might arise. Either it is at the supply side, or it is at the demand side. Both the problems occur mainly because there is uncertainty. Right? You make investments today, the demand and the costs are going to unfold over the next months and years. And we know several examples that have either been delayed or have not hit the ground, mainly because of either technological uncertainty or market uncertainty. Now let's look at the technological uncertainty from the supply side perspective. That brings a lot of pressure on where will you invest in order to bring the product or a service to the market. Market uncertainty is about the ecosystem around you, whether the customer will be really adopting it or not, given the other constraints that he or she has. Now what happens is, if you look at this from a 2x2 perspective, which is markets where there are less uncertainty and high uncertainty, and technology or the business models which are known to us or which are highly uncertain. That gives us 4 main types of innovations. Now this is not something very new, right? As in, if you see, it has been around for almost 20 years. As in Clay Christensen in 1997 talked about almost 25 years ago about disruptive innovation. And one thing which I have seen over, so now I'm kind of 25 years I'm in the market, 5 years I worked in the industry, 20 years I've been a student of innovation and strategy. And the more we keep on telling that things are very different, things are very unprecedented, the more we realize that it is the same thing. It is the same thing unfolding again and again and again, sometimes in form of the internet, sometimes in form of Internet of Things, sometimes in form of AI and autonomous driving, 3D printing, but it's more or less the same theories that were given by Schumpeter in 1930s are still applicable as much as they are in the current sense. Let's understand these 4 types of innovation. The horizontal axis, x-axis, is the supply side. The farther you go from your existing way of doing things, which is your technology, your business model, the way you are organized, you move from left to right. And the farther you go to a new demand, a new need, a need that is not existing, you go from bottom to top on the y-axis. Okay? So give you a very crude example of a radical innovation is something like a space tourism. There is no market for it currently. We are happy going to our own, islands and Maldives and Switzerland, but there is going to be a market now coming up for going to the space. Technically, today you can. A 10-minute trip costs around $250,000. The technology is also new. When the SpaceX was able to land back the rocket, this became a possibility. It's a radical innovation, very far and few. Right now, I don't think in India we are really breaking our head around this a lot. Simply, we can't afford to right now. On the other extreme is where majority of the innovations have been, which is very incremental innovation, adding new features to a phone, adding new range to an EV vehicle, and they're just making life a little better for the users and more efficient production of anything. Architectural innovations, we have seen a lot in Internet of Things, which is technology is not really new. Bluetooth, RFID, wireless, are not very different technology from what is being used, but new markets are being found. AI, for example, is currently looking for new markets that would fall to a lot under architectural innovation. But what is of our interest here and what I want to speak another 5-10 minutes on is disruption. Whenever a new technology or a new business model caters to an existing need, which means, frankly speaking, in a disruptive innovation, there is no dearth of a market. And in fact, that is the reason everybody is going after the technology to master it so that they can go after a large market. Whenever you are able to have a new business model, let's say an Uber is a different way of ordering a taxi, it caters to the same need, and therefore the incumbents get disrupted. A digital imaging camera disrupted the roles about 30 years ago. The AI in customer service support is changing the way you provide customer support, and therefore is disrupting some of those businesses. And EV is a new technology, and therefore it is disrupting the ICE engines. Now, if you look at this closely, only one of these quadrants is having a negative connotation of disruption. Because only these 2 quadrants at the bottom are actually having somebody playing in that market before something happens. The upper 2 are new markets, so nobody is really being dislodged from their position. Among these 2, among incremental and disruption, the theory tells us that it is more likely than not an outsider will disrupt and the incumbent will not be able to respond. Right? Which means I can almost guarantee that everybody sitting in this room either is being disrupted or is disrupting. Given the nature of technological onslaught that we are seeing across businesses, and the way business models are changing. So let's deep dive into this one. And what I'll try to do is before the lunch break, I will try to break the theory of disruption very simply for you, show you some of the paradoxes in that, some of the dilemmas that incumbents face. Again, not very new. But what we'll then do is in the second half, we'll try to see where are the Indian examples that help us understand this better and find a way forward. So just to kind of further differentiate between an incremental and disruptive innovation, if you look at the two pictures on your right, the top one doesn't require the supplier to change anything drastically. The same supplier of ships could still supply a slightly better ship, bigger one with more mast. But if you look at the bottom picture, that is disruption, because that's where the supplier has no game to play. As in, the supplier loses competitive advantage because it doesn't require cloth, it doesn't require the same technology, and therefore, more likely than not, it will be a new person entering the business and pushing you out of the business. I'll also talk about why you can't respond or why is it difficult for you to respond in the next couple of slides. This is the most talked about disruption currently of our times. And most of us here in the room would have seen that the range of 30, 40 kilometers per charge has now moved to upwards of 400, 500 kilometers. But what has happened is the companies that were excelling here have been struggling to get there. Most of the companies who are doing very well in the EVs are either outsiders or did not have a very strong strategy in the IC engine market. So they reinvented themselves or rediscovered themselves in the EV part of it, right? And you can list down almost literally any market, all the global automotive players, the higher their rank is, the stronger their strategy is, the weaker the response to EV is. The best that they can talk about is a hybrid, which is a totally different ballgame, and I'll talk about why that doesn't work so much. Right? Disruptions, by the way, are not new. Disruptions have been happening since, since that actually when fire was invented or when wheels were invented, because they gave us ways to do things in a different manner to achieve the same final objective. But more recently, if you see over the last 30, 40 years, the disruptions have mainly been around digitization. If you're able to digitize something, for example, music, the model suddenly takes a very different right turn. Secondly, it has always been around miniaturization. It is making things more convenient, faster, increasing the utility, and then once adoption happens, people manufacture at scale, and therefore the cost come down. And this game has been going on for every business. You can pick up any business that you are a part of or you have been observing, and you will see this has always been the case. Either the technology comes up and makes the demand very high, or debottlenecks the supply by reducing some of the cost of the ingredients. Right? Now, over the next two slides, I will kind of a little bit bore you with the theory that goes out here. So let's assume that in the circle drawn out here, this represents the current market for any business. Okay. Now, every disruption, just think of a disruption in your mind, and every disruption that has happened, you will see has happened in multiple stages. So 3 stages to be precise. The first stage and the most interesting part of any disruption, which should help you to understand where they're coming from, is that it will always, and I'll repeat, it will always happen outside of the core business of the incumbent. And there are 2 reasons for that. One, the disruptors do not want to alert the incumbents that I'm going after a core market. Second, the real reason is they can't. They don't have the resources. They are mostly startups. They don't have the wherewithal to fight a big player, and therefore they would try to find a small proof of concept, somewhere which is an ignored market. The next slide will tell you it is an overserved market by the incumbent. Second step, because it was a market which was outside of the periphery, because the incumbent always ends up saying, I don't think this is our market here. And you can, if you are a part of a large company, you would have remembered those meetings when the first time it was brought up, it was said, well, it's not really our core market. And let's focus on our TG. Let's double down on our current customers and so on. Because of that, the small disruptors grow. So as you can see, this is destined on both the sides. It is how it is going to happen. They will not respond, and that will give them some the breeding ground. And third is when it starts hitting the headlines. It starts appearing in the review meetings, and then you start seeing that, well, we are now being disrupted. You start answering the shareholders, because now there is an actual drop in your sales. Now, if you notice here, see in these two stages, step 1 and step 2, think about the largest IC engine manufacturer. Their sales are not going down. The market share is going down. But managers are always smart, right? They can always say we are still growing. Until the time when there will be a decline in the sales and in the market share. The problem is between step 1 and step 3, your ability to respond to a somewhat small competitor and now a formidable competitor has gone down drastically. So this is one point I wanted to drive home. Now, let's look at the theory in a slightly more market structure way, and I'm not going to bore you more than 2 minutes on this. Okay? Y-axis is time. So imagine phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of the previous slide. But I wanted to look at the market in a more fragmented manner, which means there is a normal distribution of the customer demands on the right-hand side of the curve here, which is like this. And it says that there are some customers, very less, who want high features. Majority are okay with average, and some are also okay with low-end features, doesn't matter. And there is a huge market below that, which is not really your customer. The problem is, and I'm choosing my word carefully, the problem is companies want to become the best in the class. Now, why I'm saying problem is because you will see what it does is it creates what we call as a white space below. It's of course good. It's of course good to be the best in the class because now you are the benchmark in the industry. Why is it a problem? Because the customer who is here at a very low end has no option but to go for the over-engineered or over-performing product. So if you remember about 20 years ago, there used to be only 100% market share was owned by Intel in microprocessors. We used to use Pentium, a 586, just to make those silly Excel and Word documents, which we could have very well done in a 386 or a 286, but they kept on investing. They kept on becoming better and better. While it was addressing the high-end needs, we were also being catered to in a home office with a Pentium, which is called over-serving the customer. But cost has to be borne by everyone. And therefore, when you go from bottom to top to bottom, the customer size reduces, the share reduces, but there are still some customers who cannot do without it and therefore will purchase it. Now, this white space is ripe for disruption, which is denoted by the red line. The first thing that the disruptors do in phase 1 is go after those customers which are outside of your immediate concern. Then they grow like the small blue circle, and then they become the blue plus gray circle. This is how they grow in this. The biggest problem that companies face is that before the disruption happened, me as an incumbent had access to the entire market. In step one, they were a niche player, but having achieved a little bit of maturity in the market, don't worry too much about the slope. The slopes can be, parallel, steeper, or flatter. But what happens is, over years, over a few steps of development, this product is the go-to product for a large part of the market. In other words, the mainstream has moved. The mainstream market has moved from the old style of thinking towards new style of thinking, the new business model. As in, we all listen to Spotify. We no longer walk out to buy a DVD or a CD, right? We all have moved to, trading which doesn't cost us anything, stock trading. It wasn't mainstream, but it has now become mainstream. The watches, the phone cameras. It wasn't mainstream 10 years back, but now it is mainstream. Understand, the incumbent is still better. The blue line still is above the red line, but there's no market left for it. They are simply having an overpriced product in most of the cases with a very, very less market to cater to. Mostly the legacy customers, and they are also seeing the eventual death of some of those customers and this segment. The whole problem here, therefore, is the incumbents are unable to, they want to, but they are unable to respond to disruption because they don't know whether they should continue on the blue line or embrace a new business, which is the red line. Be it a bank, be it a broking and distribution company, be it an automobile company, be it an education institution, be it a media agency, everyone. Because this is what every company wants to do, which is the blue line phenomena. You want to become best, you want to be over-serving the customer, invest in highly profitable businesses, but whenever disruptions have happened, the same companies have faced what Clay Christensen in 1997 called the innovator's dilemma, which is that should I innovate, which is respond to disruption, or should I not? Now, my time's up. I'm going to just take you through a couple of more slides. And then these are examples of businesses that have been disrupted. And by the way, these were the benchmarks in the industry before disruptions happened. Stronger the strategy, the more you will get hit. Because a stronger strategy means you are committed to that market, you are committed to that customer. And therefore, whenever disruptions happen, you need to relearn the whole game, which is the difficult part of it. Okay. Now, there are ways of responding, and I'll skip this one. We can take it up in the second one. But this is what I'll request all of you to think about when you're having your lunch. The whole game about responding to disruption is about understanding, because the blue dot that I showed you in the slide with a circle, unfortunately, it's not the only one. So there are hundreds around you. And the game is you need to figure out which one should you not ignore. And you have no other information more than anybody else. The information, it's like an open game. You know the hands of the competition very clearly. You also know the hands of the disruptors. But you don't know which one will be adopted by the customer and which one will have a technological advancement, so costs will go down, and therefore it will become bigger. So what we say is that either you don't see that spot, then you need to find that, is it your blind spot, that you are just not seeing this. Or you are seeing it, but it's a very, very weak signal. It's something that you are ignoring. either saying that this is not my business, or you can't really see whether the competition is taking this as a disruptive move or it is just a part of the current game. Right? Because everybody is observing the dots, everybody is doing something about it, but you can't discern what is really happening there. Right? Now, the first step is to overcome the blind spots and look for some weak signals. But the second step is to how do you frame it? Let's say if I take an example, the last panel talked about AI, that in my particular function, AI is a potential disruptor. Now, when you say it's a potential disruptor, what do you mean? Is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? Are you seeing it as a threat to your survival or are you seeing it as an opportunity? Because the graph that you saw, which was with two circles, both the things have happened. One, the white part has gone down, which is the threat part. But if you would have noticed, the market has actually doubled. The people consuming that product has doubled. So should you look at in your industry, any signal that you pick up as a threat or as an opportunity? So what would your guess be? The main reason is because if you look at it as a threat, the reaction will be very different as compared to when you look at it as an opportunity. It's mostly the threat responses are very sudden, very aggressive. It's like the flight or fight. Opportunity are usually delayed gratification. Let's not be greedy. Let's wait for it. So what will your guess be? How many of you think it should be a threat? How many opportunity? How many of you think it's a mix of both? I see more hands in opportunity, right? It's a mix of both, but you can't have both at the same time. And the beauty of this is in how you sequence it. This will be the last slide from me before lunch. The y-axis here is how your response is at the first glance. As soon as you hear about this, what was your initial reaction? Either threat or opportunity. Threat or opportunity. The x-axis is what you will eventually make out of it, which is what is your orientation? Is it negative or positive when you are making a business model out of it? I'll give you a few examples. So those of you who said threat, and it is always going to be threat, will be in the top left quadrant. You're always running away from it. This is what happened with Kodak several years ago. They felt that electronic imaging will kill them, and therefore they always used to run away, and then they kept on running away. And they just were afraid of the technology moving away. They ended up with a wrong business model that accelerated their bankruptcy. On the other right-hand bottom is the quadrant where all of you, those who felt it is an opportunity, you will be around, but very likely because of your delayed response, you will be a second player, not a market leader anymore. It's not a very bad strategy, but you are bound to give up your leadership position if you have one currently, because you are just following. You are no longer the benchmark. You have started becoming a follower in that market. The worst quadrant is the bottom left. We have this very famous case around Blockbuster versus Netflix. Many other cases where earlier the companies, Nokia was another thing. Everybody felt that this is an opportunity, so we delay it. Now, if you are lucky that nobody is investing very heavily on that, it will remain an opportunity. But later on, it actually became a threat. And therefore, they had to double down on some of the investments later on. And that killed them. Which means that you were not ready if you're looking at it as an opportunity, and therefore, once it becomes a threat, you can't do much. The right quadrant here is the sequencing where you start. First off, it's good to be afraid of a disruption. 100 blue points, 100 threats. The logic here is that if you are afraid of something, you will invest in understanding it. You will spend some late nights, you will spend some time in attending some events, some conferences, reading up, that you will also maybe have some consultants look at it, some task force set up. Once you have that advantage, then you need to sit down and look at the opportunity on it, which is, where is it I'm going to be able to make some profit pool in this revised value chain, not in the existing value chain, but in the revised value chain. Okay. So now what I wanted to do before we jump into the second session, so in the second session, I'll share a few thoughts which is more positive. The first session, I just wanted to maybe scare you a little bit that it is coming, right? It's coming. But then some of the answers are here. So I'm not sure how many industries are represented here, but if you can find some industries from where you are and think about what is the current disruption happening in your industry. It could be healthcare, BFSI, insurance or banking. It could be retail. It could be manufacturing. It could be appliances. It could be any industry that either you are or you find a few people. So maybe we can take in the second session about 3 or 4 industries where you look at what disruption is hitting that industry right now. Second, what you should be afraid of it. And third, which is where I would like to spend more time, is what is the opportunity that it actually brings. So if you look at the zero DAS disruption of the broking and distribution business, it was a big disruption that, they have an API, they have a nice app-first model, eKYC, all of those, the simplification of the onboarding and the trading process has helped a lot. Of course, the NEFT, RTGS also helped a lot, but that was a big disruption. Threat, well, they don't have any infrastructure. The large broking agencies have thousands of people calling a backend, which is very complicated, which is a part of their existing strategy. That's now under threat because that cost has to be borne. But the opportunity is the market has exponentially grown. So are we okay with this format? So when we meet again after lunch, we pick up about 3 or 4 industries, and then I'll show the rest of the slides. Right. Over to you.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Mr. Amit Karna. Thank you, sir.